This is SB Nation Radio
and SBNationRadio.com.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios. Here's Eitan.
All right. It is a very complex issue that is born out of a very simple one. Thus, our country exists. Simple concepts that are very easy on the surface that have been intertwined and tangled through nonsense, fear, bigotry, and hegemony for decades to now centuries. So while the concept is pretty simple, which is you shouldn't be doing anything negative, you shouldn't be hurting anybody, you shouldn't be saying anything truly negative to hurt, you shouldn't be acting by all means on anything, especially as a person in power, simply because of how someone looks. And that is as simple of a principle that we as a planet can never grasp. And we have been really struggling with that since our inception, since you look back. Now, again, the irony, of course, is that every single piece of of historical science that comes out and points to the earliest forms of civilization will point to small statured African people that, and this supports the Pangea theory, that are all around the world, which at some point everything was all together. And we already know Garden of Eden, depending on what book you read and how far back you want to go in your faith, we know that it's Africa. And then from there, things happen. And that what happened from the inception to now has been a pattern of injustice that has been set up and executed around the planet based off something, again, very simple, yet very destructive. And you may not realize this until you go and actually travel around the country. The world. Country here, you get a lot of it on news and TV, but you don't really get the depths of what I'm going to explain until you actually see it in other countries. But essentially, what happens is you have a structural hierarchy of power that's set up based on your skin color. And I've seen it even as somebody who is 50% Israeli. My dad, born and raised in Israel, his dad is Palestinian, born and raised in that country before him. And on the news and on TV, and I'm just going to use this one example, which is the lightest of the Middle Eastern countries by a mile, but that's mainly how you see it on television. When you see the people in power, and it was already put up in Rwanda years ago with the Hutu and Tutsis, it was already put up, the structure of power based off of how you look, to where the lighter your skin color was, the easier it was on the eyes, and therefore you were placed in power. And I remember the first time that I went to Israel and noticed that the people that I saw on television representing the state, the country, did not look like the majority of people that lived in the country. Because as you start to go deeper into areas and towns, especially knowing that the cultures that you're told are split are so similar, you start to look around and think, well, hold on, I haven't seen that. This country is the extreme example of that, of course, around the world. And through that, we have seen year in and year out and time in and time again. And now with the furthering of social media, it's even worse, where we've seen Philando Castile die. We've seen Eric Garner. We've seen George Floyd die on camera, die on film. And it's not a Hollywood movie. It's not something created by CNN or Fox News. It's real life. It's a real life that was taken for no reason, no justifiable reason. And what's happening now is needed and frustrating at the same time. Needed because You need to have the ability to voice. You need to have your ability to express. You need to have your ability to speak out after an injustice. And in the case of the people who are protesting, and there's a difference between a protest and a riot/looting event, the people who are protesting need this the most. They've needed it the most for a long time. Before this place even became the United States of America, they've needed that. Advocates, allies, etc., but they've also mainly needed their own voice. It's not somebody speaking for them. It's not some politician who may even look like them speaking for them. It's a group. It's a community. It's a specific person of color. It's not a generalized term. It's the people who have been placed at the bottom of the hierarchy since the inception and even before this country began. And now we've seen it. And where I'm frustrated is I've seen the tactics before as well. What's happened and what happens time and time again, and you're more than welcome to weigh in. This is your forum here. I'll shut up and you can express your point of view. 800-224-2004 is your phone number. But what's happened here and what happens at many a times in the past, the movement gets co-opted. The movement gets pushed aside. Here's the example. Colin Kaepernick knelt to speak out against police brutality, police murdering. How fast did the conversation shift to whether or not a player should kneel? You were already removed from talking about the root issue. And you know what? Colin Kaepernick wasn't the first to speak out about police brutality, police murdering. If you've seen The Matrix, I think it's the third one, where they reveal that Neo is just another Neo. He's just the next Neo because everything resets. We go through these periods of awakeness, and then all of a sudden we go back to sleep. We're awake, and then we're back to sleep. There's a movement, and then there's a war on drugs. There's a crime spree. There's a disease that comes. There's a movement, and then all of a sudden something hits our society and derails us. And every time the movement comes back, we reset. Every time there's a push to come back and actually make some fundamental root change, the movement itself is reset. Why? Because you have people who have now infiltrated the protests and start looting and burning and breaking, misrepresenting the message. Because the message was, not me, but the people protesting who really need it, are fighting for our basic human rights. And now what's happened, and just look at the damn medium that I'm trying to get you off of on Twitter, is anything that's labeled as protest is being put out with a video of looting and rioting. Meanwhile, you have countless videos that continue to come out of people trying to show you that there are peaceful and actual gigantic sized crowds of people peacefully protesting. And I don't necessarily think that peacefully protesting is the key to change or that rioting, looting is the key to change. But what I can tell you is that conflating the two is hurting the protesting. Conflating the two and allowing people to call protesting, people kneeling, people sitting peacefully, people, and look, filling up a police station, not with gas to burn it down, but with bodies. Filling up a public office, filling up with bodies is a peaceful protest. You putting 500 people into a precinct and just making it difficult for day-to-day work to happen is a peaceful protest. You're not hurting anybody. You're not throwing anything. You're not burning anything down, but you are getting in the way. Do it to another office, a public office, your local politician, if you subscribe to that. Your mayor's office. You know what happens if all of a sudden you show up with 500 people and refuse to leave the mayor's office? And I don't mean outside. I mean just get in front of people and just stand there. That's a peaceful protest. I know right now it seems like a foreign concept, but travel will return at length. And as much as it may seem, and I don't disagree with it, the optics of it, but as much as stopping traffic is a good optic for a protest, although you see what happened in Minnesota with that truck, and thank goodness they got him, and nobody was hit by that semi-truck. But While I can't say that specifically, what I will point to is if you have this group, and if you have this group that grows, and if you have a voice that begins to get heard, you do not allow the other side to conveniently slide you in with people who are trying to represent you, even though they know and you know they're not representing you. Somebody destroying and breaking and truly trying to be and bring anarchy while you are trying to get your message across, sitting there with a bullhorn and speaking out. Not throwing, not burning, not shooting, but speaking out. That is who I'm talking about. I'm not creating this from nothing. I'm not giving you my solution. I'm explaining what's happening. And to push it a little further, if you see right now where the specific areas are where riots and looting and the specific cities with the political affiliations that you have, make no mistake. Police are not clashing. I'm in Philadelphia. I'm watching the news nonstop. Police are not clashing. There's no back and forth. There's no opening fire, anything like that. We don't stand a chance against the militarization of police. That doesn't even count the National Guard or the actual army, if in fact it gets to that point. But what you're seeing is on purpose, police pulling back. On purpose, you're seeing the authorities pulling back and allowing these areas to continue to be violated and rioted and looted in that regards. For a couple of reasons. First and foremost, it's to try and garner some public support. And it's working on social media because already you have people that are looking at what's happening with a riot, looking at what's happening with looting, and they're calling them protesters. And that, again, is souring the initial message of what a protest is and what it should be and what it should be fueled by. So now you've already seen some of this PR campaign of, hey, we're just letting them burn things down. We're just letting them destroy stuff. Yeah, it sucks. They looted another Target. They got into the DA's office. They got wherever they did, but we're just hanging back. They could infiltrate. They could intervene, but they're allowing it to just stay put. They're allowing their units to reel back. They evacuated that precinct knowing it would burn for the optics of it. They evacuated. It's not like people were in there and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, we got to get out. These are purposeful tactics in order to continue to play no longer the media, but social media. You don't need to get on CNN or Fox News anymore to influence somebody's mind. You could just get on Twitter and put something out, put a video out. You see this? Monsters out here doing this. These are the protesters. No, they're not. They aren't the protesters. They're people who have co-opted the movement, who have co-opted the message. And you have to, I'll leave you with this. We'll talk to Richard in West Virginia. We'll get your thoughts as well at 800-224-2004. But you have to stop asking the same questions again and again on Twitter. If you're asking the question, do you see now why Colin Kaepernick knelt on Twitter? Your audience is the echo chamber that follows you. And it gets retweeted by 50,000 people. Guess what? Those 50,000 people aren't your target audience. We need to start pushing people who disagree. We need to start asking those people specifically, not just some random tweet that gets thrown out into the middle of thin air only to be retweeted. And no, seeing Nike or EA Sports or any politician / major celebrity step in and say, I feel your pain, does absolutely nothing for me, nor should it do anything for you. It's nice to see Mark Cuban. It's nice to see J. Cole. It's nice to see people on the ground. I'm not knocking and I'm not vilifying, and I'm sure as hell saying, no, don't do that. Not saying that at all. I am saying it's nice and I am saying it's refreshing to see some people there versus others. But the bar we have set for corporate America involving itself in social movements is ridiculously low. And at some point, we need to look at that and change that. This is all about the death. It's about the murder of George Floyd and countless individuals who came before that. I remember when the NYPD lit up Amadou Diallo with 41 shots for reaching for his cell phone. And it was at that point, enough is enough is enough. And you had a movement and you had music that followed it and you had marches and you had people in the streets and you didn't have Twitter back then. Maybe, just maybe, there is enough lasting power here where the protests will be heard. But I fear that we just exhaust ourselves for a week or two and then the state sits back and says, okay, are you done? And then we go back to being complicit. And if you disagree, just look at what happened after Castile's death. Look at what happened after Garner's death. Look at what happened after Diallo's death, if you want to go back even further, as long as you